Are you a state in the process of building itself? Do you need ways to find a steady source of income? Or have you struggled to find food for your entire society? Well, I have the answer for you. Introducing brand new trade routes. They come in 3 different varieties: Silk Road, Indian Ocean, or if you're feeling a little warm, Trans-Saharan. Coming soon to a state near you. Unit 2 focuses on the same time period, 1200 to 1450, as Unit 1. It just changes themes. And your theme for Unit 2 is? Yep, the theme is pretty simple. We're just talking about trade. We're talking about how all these states from Unit 1 profited off of trade routes. Or if you're feeling fancy and you want to use the official AP term, networks of exchange. There are 3 major networks of exchange that we'll unpack in the review today. They are the Silk Roads, the Indian Ocean routes, and the Trans-Saharan routes. While we don't have time to go through the ins and outs of each of these trade routes, we do have time to break down the 3 major themes from each one. Those themes are: what goods did they trade, what new technologies did they introduce, and what religions did they spread. Let's start with the oldest trade route, the Silk Road. The use of the Silk Road goes back to Han Dynasty in China, and the use of such road allowed China to become very profitable in the most dominant country in Asia. In the ancient world, China had always been ahead of its time, and its production of silk allowed it to gain economic prosperity very quickly, as silk and fine textiles were in high demand in the Roman Empire. This only continued as Arab caliphates became more prominent and also demanded those same silk goods. This ensured that the Silk Road was always profitable and a benefit to China. The importance of silk can't be underestimated. It is called the Silk Road after all. But China didn't only trade silk on the Silk Road, it also traded other materials such as porcelain. Ooh, fancy. The Silk Road also exchanged horses and foods such as nuts and dates and even tea. Most of the goods that were spread on the Silk Road were considered to be luxury goods. These are items that aren't necessary for survival, but they're also fairly expensive because they bring extra added comforts to life. The profits of such luxury goods allowed cities like Chang'an to become extremely profitable at the end of the Silk Road. The influx of these luxury goods allowed people in cities like Constantinople to live profitable and luxurious lifestyles. It's easy to see why the Silk Road was so profitable, especially for China and Constantinople, but it also changed the way business was done through new technologies and new ideas. For example, caravanserai were waypoints along the Silk Road that allowed travelers to stop, rest, and exchange goods. Kind of like a medieval quick trip, or those oasis places in Illinois. China also introduced the concept of paper money and paper currency into the world through use of the Silk Road. Paper money was revolutionary because no longer would you have to carry around bulky, noisy coins that might draw attention to potential highway robbers. It also made traveling with large sums of cash much easier. And on top of that, China also introduces a form of credit known as flying money, in which you could basically pay for things without actually having the cash in hand as long as you paid it later. This is the foundation of banking systems that we still use today, and it changes the way the economy overall works. Possibly the most important aspect and development of the Silk Road. Many Buddhist monks also traveled the Silk Road, bringing their religion with them, which is the same thing that happened with Muslim merchants who brought Islam to Asia. To summarize, what you need to know about the Silk Road is that it traded goods including silk, porcelain, gunpowder, tea, fruits, and horses, which are all considered to be luxury goods. Also introduced new technologies like caravanserai, paper money, flying money, and saddles. And finally, while the Silk Road most clearly spread Buddhism, it also spread ideas of Neo-Confucianism and a little bit of Islam. While in the same region, our next trade route, the Indian Ocean roads, are different from the Silk Road in that they're mostly maritime routes. While in the ancient world, Greek and Roman sailors began trading in this area, it wasn't until the introduction of Muslim merchants that Indian Ocean trade really intensified. Muhammad, himself a merchant, had encouraged many Muslims to begin trading and expanding throughout the world. It was only a matter of time before Muslim influence reached Southeast Asia, because the Muslims are some of the best business people the world has ever known. They were very good at trading. They were constantly on the lookout for new commodities in which they could make money off of. And the islands of Southeast Asia demonstrate one very important commodity that would make money for the rest of history. Spices. Spices like salt, pepper, cinnamon, etc. all make food taste better, so they were high in demand worldwide. But the one problem with these islands is that they were islands. In order to get these spices Travel by sea needed to be made possible, and the Arabs found ways to do this. The Arabs were the first to figure out the monsoons. All right, give me a second to rant about monsoons. A monsoon is not a tropical rainstorm. I hear people say this all the time. Oh, look, there's a monsoon outside. No, it's a seasonal wind. An understanding of these winds allows you to plot when you should sail and where you should sail, to do so at a time that is more favorable with wind conditions. On top of that, the Arabs introduced multiple technologies that allowed them to make use of this knowledge of monsoon winds. The Arabs introduced new sailing technologies, including the lateen sail, the sternpost rudder, the compass, and the astrolabe, which allowed both travel and navigation far easier across the ocean. And while the Arabs and Muslims certainly dominated Indian Ocean trade, there were other groups of people who were involved as well. China's invention of the junk ship, as well as advancements with the compass, allowed for explorers like Zheng He to sail throughout the Indian Ocean and bring even more success and profits to China. Africa even got involved in Indian Ocean trade, as the Swahili coast provided Islamic merchants with slaves, ivory, gold, and other precious materials. All right, so here's what you need to know about Indian Ocean routes. The maritime routes of the Indian Ocean included goods such as textiles, steel, spices, slaves, ivory, gold, silk, and porcelain. It also demonstrated a knowledge of monsoons, which led to the creation of lateen sails, rudder, compass, and the astrolabe, making navigation way easier. And as far as spread of religions, it's all the same religions as the Silk Road, with a little bit of Christianity. And our final trade route is the Trans-Saharan Routes. Let's see what's going on in the Sahara right now. Yeah, the Sahara Desert is just a ton of sand. It's the biggest desert in the world. So why on earth would this be a place for trade? Well, it's not about what's in the Sahara, it's what's above and what's below it. North Africa had always been a successful trading area, going back to the time of the Roman Empire and the Empire of Carthage. And just below the Sahara, there are stores of precious metals, especially gold. Africa also contains impressive stores of salt and ivory, resources that were certainly considered to be commodities. On top of that, Africa was already practicing systems of slavery, which allowed Muslim merchants and other merchants around the world to very easily get involved in this same trade. Once again, it is Muslim merchants who intensify this trade route. In this case, they bring over the camel from Saudi Arabia, as well as the camel saddle, and allow transport and travel across the Sahara Desert to actually take place. African states like Mali embraced Islam, converted, and began making use of its trade routes as well, becoming extremely rich off of the gold and salt trades. Here's what you need to know about the Trans-Saharan trade routes. They traded gold, ivory, slaves, salt, textiles, and horses, and they did so because of camels and saddles. And through it all, Islam really begins to spread into Africa. So that's the basic information about all three trade routes from the period 1200 to 1450. And it's a great reflection of the AP skill of compare and contrast. You should be able to, with all that information, compare and contrast those three trade routes. They have a lot of similarities, but there are some specific details that make them very different. Now, the second AP skill is causation. Let's talk about the effects of these trade routes. And there's two I specifically want to address: the cultural and environmental effects of trade. Anytime exchange takes place, cultures begin to change. This notably happens when religions spread, like Buddhism and Islam, two religions that rapidly grow during this time because of their relationship with trade. Exchange also allows for cities to grow both in wealth and in size as people are coming in and out. Many new cities grow on these trade routes. For example, the Indian city of Calicut, European city of Constantinople, or the island city-state of Malacca. Those are cities that grow in profit and in size because of the intense trade going on. And many of these cities are also sites for cultural diffusion, like the Central Asian city of Samarkand, in which traces of Islam and Buddhism and many other cultures around the world can still be found. An even more important cultural effect of trade is the way in which it widens worldviews. Now people have a desire to travel and see the world. And much of this can be contributed to the people who went out, experienced it, and wrote about it. Like the Italian merchant Marco Polo, who traveled to China and wrote about his time in the court of Kublai Khan. Or the Muslim traveler Ibn Battuta, who wrote about his travels to all of the Muslim lands that were connected by trade routes. But now, hypothetically, people have the ability to go and see these things for themselves. Because of the way sea travel has progressed and the safety of these trade routes, people can actually travel. Yet the most important effect might be the change in the style of economy. Shifting from a barter economy to a money economy has changed the way businesses functions and has began to promote capitalist tendencies among people around the world. Exchange, however, also affects the environment, or affects our understanding of the environment. As people begin to better understand the environment around them, it makes travel easier, such as understanding monsoon wind patterns or figuring out that a camel is better to travel through a desert. And through exchange, we better understand how to use the environment around us for our actual survival. This includes the spread of champa rice, which allowed China to grow food faster and more efficiently. Or the introduction of the banana, which was a tropical fruit, to the Bantu people in Africa, which allowed them to actually migrate because they weren't stuck in stationary areas relying solely on yams and potatoes. But not all environmental effects of exchange are good. Take, for example, disease. As people become more connected with one another, it's inevitable that disease will spread. The most notable example of this is the Black Death. The Black Death not only killed 75% of many populations, it also brought significant changes, especially to Europe. In many ways, the Black Death is the end of the feudal system because now workers who were actually alive were more valuable than they were before, and it brings a shift towards capitalism into Europe that was kind of unexpected. All right, so there you have it. That's the 3 major trade routes in Unit 2 of AP World History, as well as their cultural and environmental effects. Wait, what's that? Darn it, you Mongols coming out of nowhere. We can't talk about trade and exchange from the period 1200 to 1450 and leave out the Mongols. Yeah, I know they just seem like another group of nomadic horse people. Hey, we're way more than that, said every Mongol ever. But the Mongols truly have an impact on the making of the modern world, and a lot of that has to do with what they do to exchange. When Genghis Khan united the militaristic tribes of the Mongolian Empire, he created one of the largest empires in all of world history. It was even bigger than the Roman Empire, and with that, he had so much land and so much trade routes under his control. The Mongolian Empire's use of the horse, as well as its advanced siege weapons, including cannons and gunpowder, allowed it to very easily conquer most of Central Asia and even parts of Europe. It also rendered the old styles of military obsolete. No longer could you just armor up and hide behind a wall. The Mongol cavalry was too fast, and they had the technology with their siege weapons to destroy your wall. The Mongols even used biological warfare, taking bodies infected with the Black Death and vaulting them over enemy walls. While the terrifying, brutal tactics of Genghis Khan and the Mongols can't be ignored, they did succeed in creating a safer and more unified Asia than we ever had before. Genghis Khan's conquest brought a period of a 100-year peace in Mongol lands known as the Pax Mongolica. And because of this peace and safety, trade in the Mongolian Empire along the Silk Roads and in Indian Ocean routes began to flourish. Kublai Khan, a descendant of Genghis who ruled in Yuan, China, embraced cultural transfer, inviting people of Islamic, Asian, and even European backgrounds into his court and learning from them. The sheer size of the Mongolian Empire allowed for cultural transfer to happen worldwide. In fact, many practices of the Mongolian Empire became popular in other parts of the world. For example, the Mongolians had arguably one of the first post office systems. They also introduced the world to pants. No more wearing glorified dresses, men. You get to wear comfortable pants that allow you to ride a horse with ease. Here's what you need to know about the Mongols. They're the largest land-based empire in history, and the Pax Mongolica intensified trade around the world, encouraging the transfer of Islamic and Chinese culture. They even spread the plague and introduced the world to modern warfare while also bringing pants. All right, there you have it. All 3 of the major trade routes from Unit 2, including the Mongols this time. Stay tuned for the Unit 3 review coming soon. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.